Let me ask you a question. As a leader, either experienced leader or brand new leader, let me ask you a simple question. Let's say one of your employees came up to you and said, Glenn, I need to know what I should do. Are you going to tell them what to do? Or are you going to ask them a question, what they think they should do? A lot of managers default to the first one because it's faster and it's easier just to tell my employees what to do. Off they go, and everything is taken care of. The problem with that scenario is you are really failing to help build an independent team. What you're really doing is one of the cardinal mistakes of managers. You are creating a dependent workforce. And that's what I want to talk about today because I hear it a lot from managers. I'm hearing it a lot out on the Clubhouse app. Managers are struggling with it. They ask me how to fix that. What should they be doing? And that's what we're going to talk about in today's episode of You're in Charge, Conversations That Spark Change. Let's dive in. So as I said in the teaser, a dependent workforce. Now, for many of you, you're thinking I'm crazy. You're thinking, well, Glenn, managers are supposed to tell people what to do. We're not designed to let them fail. We don't want our results to be impacted while they're learning. They should know better, or we already went through training. I understand that. But what you're doing is you're shortchanging their long-term success. You're shortchanging your team's long-term success. You basically have put on your Superman cape or Superwoman girl cape, whichever, and you're there to save the day. You're going to be the hero. And everybody comes to you and everybody asks you what you should do and you tell them all what to do, and that feels good. I understand. The problem with this is you now can never go on vacation. You never can take a day off. Now, you're going to say, Glenn, I go on vacation or I take my days off. Let me challenge you. How often does your phone ring while you're on vacation? Does your spouse or significant other look at you and say, I thought you were taking time off? Or then you say, well, I'm just going to run into the office for a quick minute. They need something, and that turns into 3 or 4 or 5 hours. And then you don't have any time off. If this sounds familiar, well, that's because you created a dependent workforce. There are some managers out there that it is a conscious thing they do, because if I train you how to do everything, the faulty thinking in that scenario is, well, then if everyone knows what to do, they don't need me. And that's a fallacy. What they need you to do is run the team. The more that you have an independent team, the more you can do to help grow and focus on the strategy of the team versus getting bogged down into the day-to-day, reminding everybody what they're supposed to be doing. Now, as I said, if it sounds familiar, yes, everyone comes to me. They're always asking me what to do, and I have to tell them that. Or I just feel as I'm walking around, I remind people, hey, Glenn, don't forget to do this. Hey, did you take care of that? Hey, did you take care of that? You think you're helping. You're not helping. You have to get out of the way. Now, one of our early episode, I think it was 6 or 7, Dan Moore, president of VistaDash, was a guest on the podcast. And we were discussing what a manager who's new to a situation, either brand new, promoted, taking over a team, or brought in from the outside, well, how should they spend their 30 days? And the one thing that Dan said that was really impactful was they should watch and ask a lot of questions. Ask why they're doing certain things. If someone comes and asks a question, well, what do you think? Why? Now, you as a manager in that first 30 days, the reason you're doing this is because you don't have an answer yet. You don't know. So you ask a lot of questions. Something happens after 6 months, 8 months, a year of being in charge. Now that you know the routine, you stop asking questions. Now, I'm not asking questions all the time about, well, what should we do? But if someone comes up to me and says, Glenn, hey, what should I do in this situation? What an experienced manager should be asking is, well, what do you think we should do? Now, I know, counterintuitive. Why am I taking the time to do that? Either they should know, or it's faster if I just tell them what to do. And I understand that. Faster tell them what to do. But in doing that, I'm training them to come and get the answer from me instead of me figuring out, why don't you know that answer? There's only really a few scenarios of why they don't know that answer. One is maybe we never trained them, or they remember some of it, but maybe they don't remember all of it and they're unsure. They don't want to come up and ask you for more training or say, Glenn, I completely forgot what I'm supposed to be doing. Almost, I would rather you say that because it's a much more honest assessment, but they're usually not going to say that. It's quicker if I just come up and say, hey, Glenn, what should I do in this situation? Go do this. Now, so it's either I don't know, and then it's my responsibility to figure that out and retrain that person so they do know what to do. Maybe they know a little bit of it. And again, but that's still my job, is retraining. That's a knowing problem, K-N-O-W, right? I don't remember, I don't know, I need to relock this into my brain. Versus the scenario of a knowing situation, N-O, meaning I know what to do, but it's easier for me to ask you and just come up because it's just, I don't want to say I'm lazy, but why should I really think it through? Or why, if I forget what it is, I have to go do the research? Easier for me to just come and ask Glenn. He'll tell me what to do. So it's really important to create an independent team so that you can focus on more of what you should be doing as a leader, the strategy of the team, the direction of the team, instead of getting bogged down into trying to remember to do everybody's job. That's not your job. Your job is your job. Their job is their job. So if someone comes up and asks me, Glenn, what should I do? My question back to them is, what do you think you should do? If they say, well, I don't really remember, what do you remember from training about that? Write that one down. That one's going to be a great tool in your toolbox as a manager. What do you remember from training? That's going to unlock, is it a knowing, K-N-O-W, or a no, N-O, meaning I don't even want to think about this. I disagree with this, but I have to do it. So I'm just going to come and remind me, because this way I can always say, well, you told me what to do. Again, we want to break down those defenses. So always ask them that. One of my very good friends, one time when I went to go visit him in his office, had a big sign on his door, and I loved it. It said, before you come in here and ask me a question, ask yourself a question. Could I Google it? Right? It's very easy now on our phones to find answers for everything. But in your business, people should know what their job is, what their responsibility. Your job is to inspect, hold people accountable, and give feedback as they're performing their effort. But if you're constantly jumping in before they fail, before they run into the wall, so to speak, they're never going to get as good as they possibly could. Now, the second piece to this conversation of dependent managers, when I was talking to a client of mine, and he brought this up to his managers, a few of the managers said, well, you know, no one ever taught us how to train people. No one ever taught us how to do this. So let me just take a quick few seconds to explain a training process that I learned a long time ago that I've adapted and I've used for years, and it has been incredibly successful. I still have people reach back out to me with comments on social media and reconnect and say, Glenn, you know what? I still use that system that you taught me 20 years ago, and it's never failed me. Okay. Give you a little backstory of how this all started. In my 20s, late 20s, I was an actor in New York City, which meant that you were doing side jobs, odd jobs to make ends meet. And I waited tables. I grew up in the restaurant industry, meaning that was one of my first jobs. And I liked being in the restaurant industry. I cooked, I bartended, waited tables, hosted, you name it, I did it in the restaurant industry. So I was working in this mom and pop restaurant, and I said, I want to go to a fancier restaurant. Why? Because I had met some friends who were actors who were making way more money than me doing the same job waiting tables. I said, well, let me go and see what I could do. So I went to this restaurant. It was called Lola on 22nd Street between 5th and 6th Avenues. And I remember going in, it was in the afternoon when they were doing interviews, sat on the banquettes with a few people, and this woman came out and she handed everyone a sample menu and said, I need you to study this, come back tomorrow, we'll ask you some questions, and then we'll move on to the next stage. And I thought, okay. So what did I do? I went home and I memorized the menu, what went with what came with this. And that's what they asked you the next day. The very first question they asked you was, okay, what comes with this dish? What comes with that dish? Does this come with this? And those individuals who didn't know or didn't remember, they were let go. They said, that's fine. Because in their mind, if they didn't take the initiative to learn the menu, even the basics of the menu, then why would I put any time into them? So that's another good tip to vet out. And we'll talk in future episodes, and we'll bring on a guest about HR and hiring and interviewing. That'll help you as well. But that's a good way to, do you have some instant, sort of initial vetting process to get rid of some of the people who aren't even going to put in the effort. But the process was over the course of 5 days, and this is key. 5 days, they were going to train me how to wait tables. Now, I had said to the person who I was following on that first day, so the very first day you follow the waiter around, and they explained all of the things that they would do. And then I said, well, I've waited tables for a while. And they looked and they said, well, that's great. You understand how to wait tables, but I'm showing you how we do it here. And that always stuck with me as well. I know a lot of my clients are automotive dealers. I also do other sales types jobs as clients, and they bring in people with experience. But what they do is they let that person bring their experience into their business and do it their way versus saying, great, you understand this, but I'm going to make sure you understand how to work here, right? And so in that restaurant, this is the way that we do it. So first day I followed them. The next day when I followed them, they started asking me questions. Where do we go next? Now, what do we do? What they wanted to see was, did I remember it, and started to process the information. So I would say, no, we go over here, we do this, do this. Third day, I was in the kitchen to look at all of the food. So I went into all the different departments. I went behind the bar. I went into the kitchen, looking at how all the other pieces fit together in this restaurant. And then the fourth day, I started doing the job, and someone was behind me, and they would say, where are you going next? Where are you going? Where are you going? Now, for me, because I caught on and I understood, and it seemed to be an easy system to follow, by the fifth day, they left me alone and let me go take my own, section of tables. But it stuck with me, this very simple process. They showed me what to do. They asked me questions. They watched me do it. Again, they asked me questions to make sure I knew what was going on. And then they let me go do it, but they would always keep following up and checking in with me. So how I've designed this process, it's basically 8 steps. So the first step, number 1, is making sure that you're going to tell people what they're going to do. So let's say, for instance, again, automotive dealership, I do a lot of consulting and we have our digital clients there. Let's say you are going to create a new sales script, or better yet, you're going to have a new way to greet your customers when they come into your business. Great. So the what is, we are going to have a new way to greet our customers. Everyone goes, okay, now they're focused on what's going to happen. Number 2 is why. I need to explain to them why. We as people do not like being told what to do without understanding the why. We didn't like it as children when our parents said, just do it because I said so. We didn't like it then. We don't like it now. So understanding the why. Well, we feel that this is going to be a better experience. We feel that we're going to retain more of our customers or make the experience more special than our competitors by changing how we greet them. Great. Now, the third step is how. And there's 2 pieces to how. The first one is, how are we actually changing this, right? So maybe it's, well, when someone comes in, we're going to get up from behind our desk and come out and greet them and meet them at the front. And then we're going to bring them over to the desk. We're going to offer them something to drink, or whatever the new strategy is. But we're talking about physical actions. Right? Remember that actions cause results. So we have to figure out the actions that we're going to do in order to generate this new customer experience, this new feeling in the customers who we interact with. The other part of how is, how are we going to train? So we might turn around and say, okay, here's here's the new process written out. Tomorrow, 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock, we're going to meet in the training room and we're going to role play and practice this, right? So the how was how we're going to train. Very similar to the restaurant handing me the menu and saying, tomorrow, please come back and we are going to quiz you on this. Now, again, if it's a script or it's something they need to memorize, make sure that you tell them, please memorize this. It's your responsibility. Now, that next day, here's the key. This is the important piece. Demonstrate. Don't assume they understand by just telling. That's one of the problems with creating a dependent workforce, right? Because we didn't train them correctly. We told them what to do, but the picture in our brain and the picture in their brain, two different things. Remember, as children, all of our education was shown, and then somebody watched what we did. You didn't tell your child how to throw a baseball. You showed them how to do a baseball. You didn't figure it out. The teacher didn't tell you how to do a math problem. They showed you how to do a math problem. Then you went up on the board and they watched as you did it and they guided you and gave you feedback. So demonstrate, show them how to do it, because that way it's very clear. I watch what you do. Then the next piece, right? The next step is role play, meaning flip it. So in this case, our scenario, I am the employee and someone is the customer and we role play. I show them what I want them to do. Then we flip it around. I'm the customer, you're the employee, and we practice. We practice until we get it right. The next step of this would be giving them feedback. You're adjusting, you're tweaking. That part was great. We need to do that, right? So we're constantly role playing. We're constantly figuring out how to do this. Now, once we do this, once we start doing that, then the next piece that we're going to end up doing is we want to get acceptance and acknowledgement. Now, you may turn around and say, well, Glenn, what do you mean acceptance and acknowledgement? Well, what we want to do is make sure they understand what we're talking about. The reason is there are some people that are very talented at mimicking what you're doing, right? They're mimicking. They can watch what you're doing and then they're going to do it. And you think they have it and then they leave the room and they forget everything. So what I want you to think about is getting them to tell you once we role play and everything's perfect, you say to them, okay, explain to me what we just changed. Explain to me the new process so that they can explain. The reason is if in case there's a missing step, I can fix it now before I unleash them on my customers. So again, we want to make sure they tell me, well, this is what we used to do. Here's what we do it now. I want to make sure that they understand. Then the very last step is follow-up. Now, for most of these processes, initially when you push your team out to go back and start executing on these, again, depending how quickly they're going to use this new skill, I would make sure your follow-up is pretty close. Maybe in an hour, go check in on them, and then a few times on day one. As you're following up, if things are going well and you're watching them and they're doing it well, then maybe you extend out and say, I only have to check in on them once or twice a day, then once a day. Well, then once every other day. Understand you're never going to stop checking. The minute you stop checking is the minute they don't think it's important anymore and they forget to do it. So maybe it just goes into your regular follow-up process as you're inspecting their performance. Normally, now we have a new thing to look for as well. But we want to hold people accountable. We want to keep coaching them and developing them. So again, if we follow this process, if I go and I see that they've drifted off and they're not doing what we need them to do, it's easy for me to get them back on track because remember, they were doing it in front of me perfectly when we were role playing. They were doing it. The first couple of times they did it and I checked in, they were doing it. Maybe habit, right? Their old habits are fighting against this new change and we got to get them back on track, but it's easier to get me back on track because I did it than if I'm just telling them instead of showing them and making sure. If I'm just telling them, how many times have you had an employee said, oh, is that what you wanted? I thought you meant X. So it's easier to get them back on track. The other key is, again, as we started in the scenario, if somebody comes up and says, Glenn, what should I do? You can say, well, what do we remember from training about that? And then we can uncover, did they just forget what they were supposed to do, retrain, or they've decided that it's not important anymore, or their way is better, or something else. But then I can have that conversation versus just trying to keep training them over and over and over and over and over again. So again, in summary, we want to make sure that we're not creating a dependent workforce. I know, again, in your heart of hearts, you're doing the right thing. You're helping your team. You're saving them the frustration, but that's not your job. Notice sports. We love sports. The coach cannot run on the field. They can't run on the field to push them out of the way or move somebody and say, you're supposed to be over here. After the play is over, we can bring them over and we can talk to them. But remember, if it's a repetitious mistake, they keep making the same mistake, they're not playing. Right? Baseball players go through a slump. They don't play. If you're missing your basketball shots, you're not playing. We'll work with you. We'll coach you. We'll develop you and get you back on track, but you're not going to hurt the team. But by you solving it for them all the time, you're creating a dependent workforce. You're not going to have a fully successful team. So again, be very careful about creating a dependent workforce. Like I said, I know your heart's in the right place. Follow that coaching process. I think that will help you as well. And I hope you found value. So again, a lot of tools for your toolkit. Go back, listen to this a couple times. I think it's going to help you. And as I say at the end of every episode, you're in charge, but now you have a couple more tools to make you more successful. So I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please don't forget to subscribe, share it out with your friends. There's a lot of people who could use this type of feedback because they are creating dependent teams without even knowing it. And as always, throw your comments down and below. I'd love to hear what you think about this. Again, I thank you so much for your attention. I appreciate you being here. I look forward to seeing you on future episodes. We're going to be bringing some fantastic guests with us in season 2 now. We have a new look, a new feel, new sound, new topics. Can't wait to help you. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time.